Paul Newman talked about the 5 actors in Hollywood that people were really scared of. This was not because of rumors or just not liking them. Because these actors made people feel really uncomfortable when they were alone with them. Paul Newman had good eyesight, and he noticed everything that was going on. He worked with famous people in the movie business for a long time, and he saw what it was like to be famous. When people were watching movies, they saw how talented and glamorous the actors were. Paul Newman saw what these actors were like when they were not acting and the cameras were not rolling. Paul had a list of people he did not like. A friend of Paul, who worked with him on movies, said this. These people were not just hard to work with or annoying. They were men who could scare everyone away. When they showed up, experienced directors felt nervous and wanted to leave. Paul was different from other famous people in Hollywood. He would sometimes tell his friends what he really thought about the people in the movie business who scared everyone. Paul would share his thoughts with people he trusted about the men in the movie business who were really intimidating, like the ones on his list. These were not stories about people who thought they were better than everyone or about people who could not get along when it came to work. What follows are the 5 actors who made it onto Newman's list of Hollywood's most feared people. These actors, being men who had really bad tempers, did crazy things, and were capable of scaring people a lot when they were working, and even when they were not working. Number 1. Robert Mitchum. He was a man who just did not seem to care about anything. When Robert Mitchum was on screen, he looked really dangerous. Like he just did not bother with anything. This made Robert Mitchum perfect for movies like film noir and westerns. When Robert Mitchum was not acting, this way of being detached from everything started to be really scary. The people who worked with Robert Mitchum said that he just did not care about doing a job or being nice to people. This made it really hard to know what would happen on the sets of his movies. Robert Mitchum's sets were very unpredictable because of this. Director Sidney Pollack talked to Robert Newman about Robert Mitchum when they were working on Absence of Malice. Sidney Pollack said that Robert Mitchum was really cool when you saw him in movies, but when you met him in person, he was really cold. Robert Newman had seen Robert Mitchum on sets near him when he was just starting out. What really got to Robert Newman was not Robert Mitchum's temper, because it could get really bad fast. It was more that Robert Mitchum just did not care about what might happen to him. Robert Mitchum would show up drunk, just leave the set for days and not tell anyone why, or he would just ignore what the director told him to do. The way Mitchum behaved was not mean-spirited, it was just that he really did not care about working with other people to make a film. A production manager who worked on several of Mitchum's films said that Mitchum did not try to cause problems on purpose. Mitchum just did not think about what other people needed or were worried about. He did not think those things were important. This made it very hard for the directors, actors, and crew to know what to expect from Mitchum. Mitchum's indifference made it really tough for them to do their jobs. Mitchum was an unpredictable guy. Sometimes he would do things that were not okay at work. His mood could change in a second. He would get into fights with people over things that would not bother other actors. A person who helped with the script said that Mitchum would show up drunk sometimes. He would yell at the directors, even hurt people who worked with him. One time he hurt a crew member just because they tried to help him with his lines. What was really scary about Mitchum was that you never saw it coming. He could be talking to you calmly, then suddenly get really angry and try to hurt you. Mitchum could go from being nice to being mean, without anyone noticing anything was wrong. Number 2. Wallace Beery, a man who people remember for being really scary, not for being indifferent. Wallace Beery was different from Mitchum, because Mitchum did not show emotion, but Wallace Beery was mean on purpose, and he often picked on people who could not defend themselves. What made Wallace Beery really bad was that he seemed like a guy when people were watching, but he was not like that when he was alone. A person who writes about movies and Newman's rare comments said that Wallace Beery was a big star from the old days, but he was really awful when the cameras were not rolling. Newman was really upset by the way Beery behaved. It was not 1 or 2 bad things that Beery did, but it was the way he always targeted people who could not defend themselves. Beery seemed like a guy to the public, but he was actually very mean to certain people. He mostly picked on child actors, women, and people who worked behind the scenes and did not have a lot of power. If these people said anything about Beery, he could ruin their careers. Lots of people who worked with Beery said that he would often yell at them, scare them, and sometimes even get physical. Beery's behavior was a problem, and it happened a lot on his movie sets. Jackie Cooper, who worked with Wallace Beery as a kid on The Champ, told Paul Newman that Wallace Beery was mean to people, kids and women. He was a bully. That is what Jackie Cooper said about Wallace Beery. Newman was really upset about how the movie studio looked out for Wallace Beery. They made sure Wallace Beery was taken care of. The people he hurt had no one to go to. The studio did not just make sure Wallace Beery behaved on set. They might have also kept him from getting in trouble. For a time, people talked about Wallace Beery possibly being involved in the death of Ted Healy. Ted Healy started the Three Stooges. This happened in 1937 after a fight outside the Trocadero nightclub. Wallace Beery was never really held accountable for what he did. Number 3. Sterling Hayden. Newman thought Sterling Hayden was an intense guy. He was very tall, 6'5". That made him stand out. When Sterling Hayden acted, he was so good that not many people could do what he did. But what made him really scary was that he was just as intense when he was not acting. People in Hollywood were actually afraid of him because they never knew what he would do. Sterling Hayden was like the face of those tough movies, and he had the fist to back it up. What Newman was really worried about with Sterling Hayden was not that he would always fight, but that you could never tell what he would do next. Sterling Hayden was just very unpredictable. Hayden could be really nice and work well with people for a time, then he would just lose it over something small. The people he worked with never knew what to expect from Hayden. They did not know if they would get the Hayden who was calm and focused, or the Hayden who was angry and yelling all the time. One person who helped manage some of Hayden's movies said that Hayden was a guy, and he got really angry and violent. This person thought that just being around Hayden was scary because he was so big. When he got angry, it was even worse, and people were actually afraid of getting hurt by Hayden. Newman found out about Hayden from watching him on sets that were close by and from talking to people who had worked with him a lot. The stories people told Newman were always the same. They said Hayden was a man who could be very quiet and serious or very angry and loud. Newman told someone he worked with that Hayden was always one way or the other. He was never in between. This was not an act. It was really how Hayden was. Sometimes Hayden got so angry that he would say things that scared people, and he would even get physical. One person who worked at the studio said that during a meeting to talk about a contract, Hayden got so mad that he threatened a producer with a hammer, and this made everyone in the room very afraid. Newman learned that Hayden was a man who could get very angry, and this was something that people who worked with him saw often. Number 4. Spencer Tracy. He had a side that people did not know about. This was very different from how people saw him in public. People really liked Spencer Tracy because he was an actor, and they thought he was very professional. The people who worked with him knew something was not right. One person who studied history said Spencer Tracy was a person with a secret life. Newman thought the scary thing about Spencer Tracy was that he seemed like one person, but he was actually someone else. This made it very confusing when Spencer Tracy did things. The main problem with Spencer Tracy was that he drank much alcohol. The thing about Spencer Tracy is that people in the movie business knew he had a drinking problem. The studios made sure it did not hurt his career. They protected him from getting in trouble. If someone else had done what he did, they would have been fired. One person who worked with him on a lot of movies said Spencer Tracy was an actor, but when he was drunk, he was mean. This person said that nobody knew what he would do when he was drunk, and that made people scared. Sometimes Spencer Tracy would be fine, do his job well for weeks. Then he would show up on set, be a completely different person. He would say mean things to people and be very cruel. He would even try to hurt people. When these things happened, Spencer Tracy would often pick on the people who had the power, like the crew members and the actors who were not stars. A director who knew Spencer Tracy talked to Paul Newman about him. Said that because Spencer Tracy was a big movie star, people were afraid to say anything when he was mean to them. Paul Newman thought Spencer Tracy was an actor, But he also knew that Spencer Tracy was a good example of how being a big star can make people think they can get away with being mean. Someone who knew Paul Newman and Spencer Tracy well remembered Paul Newman saying that people were afraid of what Spencer Tracy might say to them, and they were even more afraid of what Spencer Tracy might do to them. The movie studios did a lot to help Tracy. They gave him his crew members and changed their schedules to fit his better hours. They also made sure people thought things about him. Newman thought this was a problem in Hollywood. He believed that people there cared more about making money than doing what is right. The studios wanted to keep making movies with Tracy, so they did what they had to do to keep him happy. Newman saw this as a thing where making money was more important than being honest and fair, especially when it came to Tracy and the movie studios. Number 5. Burt Lancaster. Burt Lancaster got his power from being very careful and thinking things through. He did not use behavior or scare people to get what he wanted. Instead, Burt Lancaster used his control to get things done. A movie director who worked with Burt Lancaster said that even though Burt Lancaster looked happy when people were taking his picture, when the cameras were not around, he was a serious person who liked to be in charge. He also got very angry if things did not go his way. What really made Burt Lancaster scary was that he could control himself. Burt Lancaster knew how much to push people to get what he wanted from them. Lancaster's past as a circus acrobat and a veteran of World War II made him a confident person. He knew how things worked in Hollywood and who had the power to make things happen. The people in charge said that Lancaster understood how decisions were made and how to use his importance to get what he wanted. He did not often have to speak. A person he worked with said that Newman mentioned Lancaster never had to yell at people. This is because everyone already knew what would happen if they disagreed with him. Lancaster's background in the circus and the war gave him a lot of insight into how to deal with people in Hollywood. Lancaster was really good at managing productions. He made sure everything ran smoothly on set. He did things his way. The writers, directors, actors, and even the big bosses at the studio had to adjust to what Lancaster wanted. He had a lot of influence. It was not always obvious. Directors would often think they were making their decisions, but really they were doing what Lancaster wanted. The scripts would change to fit what Lancaster liked. It would seem like everyone was working together. Newman thought Lancaster was very smart and talented. He also knew that Lancaster's power made people afraid of him. Lancaster's power was something, and it made people feel a certain kind of fear. Newman said that Lancaster was not the person, but he was the one that people feared the most. What really worried Newman was that Lancaster knew everything about Hollywood, from how the business side worked to the relationships between people, and he used this knowledge to stay in charge of things. Lancaster had a good understanding of how Hollywood worked, and he used that to his advantage, which is what concerned Newman the most about Lancaster. Newman's perspective is really special because he always did what he believed in. He treated everyone the same, whether they were actors or people behind the scenes. A historian pointed out something about Newman's list. He never showed up on anyone else's list. This is cool because a lot of people in the movie business think it is okay to be mean or difficult, and they say it is part of being a good artist. Newman showed that you can be successful for a long time and still be a good person who is fair to everyone. Newman's way of doing things was about being fair and respectful, and that is what makes Newman's perspective so meaningful. Paul Newman's legacy goes beyond the movies he made. He showed us that being a star can be a good thing if you use it to do good things. What Paul Newman saw and talked about was not bad people, but also big problems in Hollywood. Sometimes Hollywood cares more about making money than treating people right. Knowing what happened in the past helps us see how much Hollywood has changed and how more it needs to change. Paul Newman's legacy and the problems he saw in Hollywood are important to remember. If this exploration resonated with you, consider liking the video, subscribing for more deep dives into Hollywood history, and sharing which revelation surprised you most or what topics you would like explored next.